Shalom and greetings VFI News supporters and anyone else watching this video. Is there anybody else? Certainly there is. You and your friends and your family, let's go. There are intensive diplomatic efforts by the United States and France to try to pull us back from the brink of a major war. It's not a major war already, but candidly, I don't expect those efforts to pan out. This bus has left the station and it's really hard to imagine how it can be turned around after everything that's happened this past week. That's the main theme here, friends, but there's much more just ahead on this week's edition of VFI News from Israel. Yes, friends, there are still statements being made about the need to avoid a major war between Israel and Hezbollah. Although, if we're not already in a major war, then I'm not sure what you'd call it. To give a brief summary about how we got here, Hezbollah began firing rockets into Israel on October 8, 2023, a day after the Hamas massacre which started the war in Gaza. Hezbollah has said all along that it would stop firing into Israel if there is a ceasefire in Gaza. But when they say ceasefire, they mean a unilateral Israeli surrender and withdrawal from the Gaza Strip that would leave Hamas in power there, which is and always was a non-starter. So this conflict has dragged on for 11 months, during which time there were daily barrages of rockets, anti-tank missiles, and UAVs from Hezbollah into the Galilee and the Golan Heights. This forced around 60 to 70,000 residents of northern Israeli communities to become internally displaced refugees inside their own country, the nation of Israel. These people are living in hotels in the center and south of the country, and the government is paying for it. The government is also paying them unemployment benefits and, in general, taking care of them. Their children are not in the schools they were at, as they should be. People are away from their work. Farms and orchards are not being tended, etc., etc. And in addition to that, this war has shut down tourism to Israel, which is a major engine of the economy with over 100,000 people working in it. But many of those people are not working now because there are no tourists. This is just an unsustainable situation for all kinds of reasons. Something needs to change. I repeat, something needs to change and will change. Last week, the government added returning Israeli residents of northern communities to their homes as a major objective in this war. Shortly thereafter, there was a sharp increase in the number of strikes on Hezbollah targets in Lebanon, including weapons depots, rocket launchers, and individual terrorist leaders. This included some of the most senior people in the organization, and you've probably seen these leadership flow charts with everyone except Hassan Nasrallah, the overall leader of the organization at the top of the pyramid, eliminated, except for maybe two. I have a suspicion, by the way, that the IDF could get to Nasrallah if they wanted to, but they're leaving him alive because there needs to be somebody to sign the surrender document. If that doesn't happen at the end of this process, we could have guerrilla wars and other lingering problems for years. Be that as it may, this stepped-up air campaign is being supported by IDF artillery strikes on Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanon. I'm only mentioning this because a friend of mine is in the IDF artillery, and he complains that everyone is always talking about the Air Force and no one ever mentions the artillery. So this report was for you, pal. You know who you are. And by the way, my father was in reconnaissance for artillery in the Second World War, and he won a few medals for it, and I miss him greatly. In any case, there is a large-scale assault on Hezbollah that's ongoing, and it's having some pretty spectacular results. Large numbers of rockets and rocket launchers have already been destroyed. The Air Force hit over 2,000 Hezbollah targets just in the first few days, according to the IDF spokesman, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari. Now, many of the weapons that have been targeted were stored in civilian homes. Can you believe it? Well, you better believe it. And the IDF has shared photos and videos of secondary explosions in the ruins of bomb buildings that prove weapons were indeed being stored there. Well, even if the efforts by Western powers to bring about a ceasefire are successful, this campaign has already degraded Hezbollah's capabilities to threaten Israel, and to a very large degree it has also restored Israel's deterrence, which was badly damaged on October 7th. More to the point, the Hezbollah presence in southern Lebanon was the sword of Damocles hanging over the head of Israel, and it couldn't be left in place. We've known for years that Hezbollah was building up a massive arsenal of rockets and missiles to shoot at us whenever their Iranian masters decided that it was time to unleash them, and sooner or later there would be a reckoning. That day has come. The end is near. And we've got a lot more to share with you all about that. But first, I want to ask you to go to visionforisrael.com and click on the Projects tab. At Vision for Israel, we've been working nonstop for the past 11 months of this war to reinforce this country against the threats it faces. We've placed hundreds of bomb safety shelters all over the country, not just for Jews, but for Arabs, for Druze, for immigrants, for whoever needs to run to a shelter to protect those lives. What is a life worth in money? You cannot value it. It's precious in the sight of God, and it's precious in our eyes too. Well, anyways, nearly half of Israel's population has had to run to a bomb shelter in the past few days because of the increased volume of incoming rocket fire from Hezbollah. They're not just standing there taking this on the chin. They're fighting back, and it has the potential to get much worse. And that's why we can't stop placing these bomb safety shelters. This is a project of utmost urgency, and I'm asking you to help us with it. But we've got other projects that are also very important, including training and providing equipment for firefighters, which is highly relevant right now because these rockets often land in agricultural fields and wooded areas and start fires. According to the JNF, over 37,000 acres have burned in the north of Israel since this war started. That's something that I personally think ought to be reported on much more, especially for you environmentalist concerned people out there, as I am. And I'm sure there have been fires up in Lebanon too. Another project we have is training and equipment for civilian emergency response teams and medical first responders. Again, these are people who are going to be very hard at work in the coming days, weeks, and months. They routinely go into harm's way to care for people who have been hurt. And when they go there, they deserve to have a ballistic helmet and a protective vest and other protective gear. We've been providing this gear as well as other medical disposables and other equipment they need to bind up the wounds. I could go on, friends, but you get the point. Vision for Israel has been in operation for over 30 years now, and this nation is not out of the woods yet. So please go to visionforisrael.com and click on the Projects tab to see how you can help with this vitally important work. Now back to the news. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, is not just blasting Hezbollah from the air. They are making serious preparations for a ground offensive into southern Lebanon to physically push Hezbollah forces back away from the border. This is a good place to remember that the UN Security Council, Resolution 1701, which ended the Second Lebanon War in 2006, has a clause saying that there should be no military forces south of the Litani River aside from the Lebanese National Army and UN peacekeepers. To briefly explain, the Litani River is about 20 miles north of the Israeli border, and this clause of 1701 is actually very sensible. Although for reasons it would take me too long to explain, most of the rest of this UN Security Council resolution is not relevant anymore. Now, many things have changed since it was drafted in 2006, and it's simply obsolete. The fact that it is being used as a basis for negotiations to try and get a ceasefire in this current conflict is an indication, to me at least, that we shouldn't expect this effort to succeed. Be that as it may, Hezbollah has disregarded that clause about them not deploying forces south of the Litani River, and in the last few years they have set up firing positions and observation posts literally inches away from the border with Israel. I ask you, where is the UN Security Council in all this? There is, by the way, no natural barrier separating Israel and Lebanon. It's not like the Rio Grande River, which separates Texas from Mexico. The border is marked by a row of blue UN barrels in some places, and there's an actual fence in other places. Now, obviously, that border wouldn't be difficult for Hezbollah to breach. There have long been fears that the Radwan Force, which is the Hezbollah commando unit, would be sent across that border to carry out attacks like the one that Hamas actually did carry out on October 7, 2023. That fear, almost as much as the daily barrages of rockets, anti-tank missiles, and UAVs that Hezbollah sent across the border, is why 70,000 Israelis had to evacuate these northern communities. If Hezbollah is not physically pushed back away from the border, that fear will remain, and these people will not be able to return to their homes, even if the rocket fire stops. But it doesn't show any sign of stopping. Stop in the name of love. In fact, things seem to be intensifying even as the VFI news team was preparing this report on Thursday morning. Hundreds of rockets and missiles have been fired into Israel by Hezbollah in the past few days. Most of them were intercepted or fell in unpopulated areas. As I mentioned before, many of these rockets started fires, and I'll repeat what I've said before, that when you hear that a rocket didn't cause any casualties or damage, that doesn't mean it didn't cause any problems. Also, animals are suffering. For those of you who care and love animals, like I do as well, they're suffering as a result. Speaking of which, a ballistic missile was fired at Tel Aviv from Lebanese territory on Wednesday morning, and it was intercepted by the David Sling air defense system. On Wednesday evening, a pair of suicide drones were fired at the southern Israeli resort city of Eilat by the Iranian-backed Islamic resistance in Iraq. One of these drones was shot down by a SAR-5 naval corvette in the Red Sea, while the other one hit the port area in Eilat, causing superficial damage and lightly wounding 2 people. I'm not sure how much we should worry about this fairly minor event, but it's definitely not a positive sign of where things are going. Meanwhile, IDF Chief Halevi visited the IDF 7th Armored Brigade in the Galilee on Wednesday, telling them, "You can hear the jets above. We are attacking all day. Now it's both to prepare the area for the possibility of your entry into Lebanon and also to continue causing blows to Hezbollah. The goal is a very clear goal, to return the residents of the north safely." This is a good place to mention that the Ministry of Defense of Israel has instituted what it calls a special situation in the entire country this week, and I'm sure this will be extended for the indefinite future. The special situation means that the IDF has been given broad authority over the civilian population in order to deal with the security situation. They can order civilians to enter their shelters, they can close schools and businesses, set up roadblocks and direct civilian traffic, etc. It's basically a declaration of martial law, but practically speaking, it's unlikely to be used very much unless there is an actual emergency situation. I also wonder really how compliant Israelis are likely to be. A lot of us don't have a lot of patience, and that's a word I'm going to teach you. It's savlanut. Everybody out there say savlanut. It means patience. It's been more than a generation since the last time martial law was declared in this country, and most Israelis really don't have that kind of mindset. That includes both the civilians and the soldiers who will be tasked with enforcing these orders if it comes to that. Be that as it may, millions of Israelis were ordered, maybe should say strongly advised, to stay close to their bomb safety shelters this week, and many of these people actually had to go down into their shelters for at least a few hours. Some people spent even longer in their shelters. But there was one Israeli who wasn't heading to the shelter on Wednesday, and that's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Instead, he was heading to the airport so he could get on a plane and fly to New York City for the UN General Assembly meeting. Bibi has made speeches at several UNGA meetings over the years, and this one might be his last, only because we don't know if we'll be in new elections by the next time. It will certainly be one of his most important, if not the most important speech he's ever given there. I believe he is also scheduled for some other meetings and all that, which will be in the middle of the night here in Israel. So I may have to bring you another quick VFI news update to give you some of the latest developments. Now, Netanyahu has reportedly given the go-ahead for high-level negotiations with Hezbollah aimed at a ceasefire. But again, I think we're just going through the motions so that when the big show starts, everyone can say they did their best to stop it. In any case, the massive air campaign against Hezbollah and the preparations for a ground invasion, including the mobilization of 2 reserve brigades, were continuing on Thursday. That tells you everything you need to know about how high expectations are that these talks will have the desired effect of preventing an even bigger conflict from erupting. Now we're getting close to the end of the video, so I'm just going to quickly review some of the other big stories coming out of Israel this week. To start with, the battle against Hamas in the Gaza Strip has not ended, just to let you know. And Israeli intelligence agencies are unsure if Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, is still alive or not. There are reasons to suspect that recent communications attributed to him, including a very strange message of congratulations to the incoming president of Algeria that surfaced on September 11th. At the time, I had the feeling there was something fishy about that message, and now we know that some in the intelligence community also thought so. It just seems really odd that Sinwar would randomly send a message in the middle of a war, and it might have been because he didn't send it at all. It might have been a test of the ability of lower-level Hamas functionaries or dysfunctionaries to pretend to be with him, since the actual him is no longer alive. But they're not ready to admit that to the world because it would leave them with no choice but to surrender. White flag time, Hamas. That's the speculation anyways, and we'll have to wait and see. Other messages purporting to be from Sinwar have also surfaced in recent days, but again, their authenticity is very questionable. Now, if Sinwar is in fact dead, then like I said, there's no real point for the surviving Hamas fighters to continue the battle. But there's also no one else who has the necessary stature within Hamas to make a deal for the release of Israel's remaining hostages. To say nothing of all the other things we'd like to see Hamas agree to. Release those hostages. Hamas, guys, let them go home to their families. You've already underfed them, and you've already persecuted and beat them to a pulp. Let them go home. Another battle that isn't over is the one going on in Judea and Samaria, where the IDF, Shin Bet, and border police are battling to push back an Iranian attempt to stand up terrorist groups and criminal syndicates in order to menace the Israeli heartland. To give credit where credit is due, the Palestinian Authority police are playing a somewhat positive role in this battle against Iranian influence as well, and in case you've never prayed for those guys, now would be a good time to start. They have no love for Israel, but they do things from time to time that help Israel for their own self-interested reasons, and in the Middle East we call that a win. And on that note, everybody, it's time to wrap up this week's edition of VFI News, but there may be many more short updates. God bless you and shalom, and remember to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They shall prosper that love thee. God bless you and shalom.